Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kazuri Alameen. I want to drop a few words of wisdom on you this evening. I've just finished doing one of my many groups of many times I've done the group on grief and loss. Grief and loss. Grief and loss, ladies and gentlemen, is a very, very real dynamic, and I've been teaching this for a long time. I want to encourage you, if you're dealing with any grief and loss issues, part of the healing process is to be where you are and you are where you be. And sometimes along the highway of grieving, it's not going to taste good, it's not going to feel good, it's not going to be good. So you want to work through it piece by piece. The definition for grief is a deep sorrow. Key word being a deep sorrow. The definition for loss is the fact of losing something or someone. The fact of losing something or someone is the dynamics for loss. And grief and loss run hand in hand. I mean, you can be grieving over friends, you can be grieving over a job, you can be grieving over certain things in your family, you can be grieving over betrayal, you can be grieving over moving to another city. I got a lot of people right now that are grieving over being sick. So it comes in different forms, ladies and gentlemen, but part of the process is you got to be where you at with that dynamic. And some people understand this, some people don't understand it, some people don't want to understand it, and I take a person where he or she may be. It's totally okay because we all got a different DNA. But grief is something that you cannot rush. Don't let nobody rush you through it. You have what I call a human time clock, and you'll get there when it's time. And don't let nobody grief compare you. And what I mean by that is, well, sir, I lost my dad too, so I know how you feel. I lost my job too, I know how you feel, which is totally not okay. Some people don't know no better, and I respect that. But you cannot grief compare because, example, you can have two people and both people lost their fathers, example. And one person could have had a relationship with their father, the other person could have never had a relationship. So if this person dies, you might not feel anything. So you don't know who a person is. So don't let nobody grief compare you. And there are also people who will try to make you shame about where you should be in your healing process, about a situation that had nothing to do with them, but yet they're going to put a timeline on your healing about your experience. So I work with that a lot. Don't let nobody rush you about where you should be in your healing process about, once again, the experience that had nothing to do with them. Because we all going to taste grief and loss in this life, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, every spiritual man, I feel really good about saying this. I've been in the mental health business for 40 years. It's a hell of a lot I don't know, but it's a hell of a lot I do know. And so we all taste grief and loss. It doesn't matter about the labels we have behind. It doesn't matter about your gender. Don't matter about your bank account. Don't matter about your religion. Don't matter about where you stay. We all going to taste grief and loss in this world. And I feel real comfortable saying that. I have evidence of that in these 40 years of doing groups. So I want to encourage you, as you're healing with your grief and loss, take it step by step. And once again, grief is a deep sorrow. But I think sometimes I was doing my group tonight, I was able to share with the people I want to share with you all. Sometimes we misunderstand, or we don't talk about it enough as we're dealing with grief and loss. What about the grief and loss of yourself? What do you mean, Mr. Kazuri? I mentioned a minute ago about your job or your family members. That's a deep sorrow, highly respected. But sometimes we have a tendency, we can get so far out there that we lose our own self. And I know people, when you're grieving and you're dealing with your loss because of your own self, you've gotten somewhere that you're not pleased with who you are. You got a deep sorrow as a result of the way you are treating your own self. We need to talk about that much more. And I did that tonight. So if you're grieving and dealing with any loss as a result, as the way you have treated yourself or treating yourself, you're not pleased with it. Once again, same principle. Take it inch by inch. But sometimes life can put us in situations through adversity and prosperity where we begin to lose who we are. That can cause a lot of grief and loss also. Not to minimize anything else, but everything we do, ladies and gentlemen, in this world starts with us. And then it grows abroad. But are you dealing with any self-grief? Are you dealing with any self-loss? And then you can go deal with your other issues that you got to deal with as far as grief and loss. But it's a human dynamic. We all deal with it. But you want to get you some interventions to be able to help you deal with it appropriately. One of the greatest things is to understand it. Like I said, grief is a deep sorrow. I didn't say a shallow sorrow. Loss is the fact of losing something or someone. And once again, don't let nobody guilt you in the way you should be about your grief loss by the experience that you dealt with or you're dealing with or have dealt with you, and it had nothing to do with them. And a lot of people do that. So I would encourage you, as you're healing, take your time with it. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you want to get to a certain point. Are you repressing? I want to ask you this question. Are you repressing at this time any guilt and sadness about grief and loss? Are you repressing any sadness or guilt at this time about grief and loss? How do you know when you're grieving? A lot of people say they're grieving and they're grieving, highly respected, but some people don't know. I like to call it peel the onion. How do you know when you're grieving? Once again, this is something only you will know. These are only questions that you will know. Nobody can answer for you. How do you know when you're grieving? When will you know that you have healed? This is an inside job, not an outside job. As you're working through your grief piece by piece, inch by inch, minute by minute, second by second, when will you know that you've healed? That's something that only you would know on the inside of you, not anybody else. And also, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, like I said, I'm dealing with a lot of people who are dealing with a lot of grief at this time. Highly respect, there's a lot going on in the world. So at this time, can you honestly say, are you grieving at this time, regardless of what it may be? Or do you know whether you're grieving at this time? If you are highly respected. And if you're not, highly respected also. But if you're grieving at this time, once again, work through it inch by inch, minute by minute, second by second. Don't let nobody rush you. You'll get there when it's time. But on these questions that I'm asking you, these situations I'm talking about right now, that's only something you will know. It's because it's so very, very vital, ladies and gentlemen. And I hate to see people who have been damaged by people who are trying to help, some people not trying to help, but where you should be. Are we going to grief compare? You should be here by now. You should have been through that by now. But once again, it had nothing to do with that person. If you're not strong in your self-esteem, that'll get you bamboozled. You'll get hoodwinked. Well, I talked to somebody and they said I should have been there by now. I should have been over that by now. And now you double-minded, I like to say. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to a lot, but hear only a few people. Like I said, I've been doing groups for 40 years. Don't let nobody rush you in this dynamic. You got to be where you at, because part of being where you at in the process, that is the healing. That is the road to recovery. Can you imagine, example, say you're grieving and you say you're not, I'm over it now, and when you're in your private thoughts, you know you're telling a lie? Then you begin to believe the lies you tell yourself. You begin to rationalize it. That kind of stuff causes depression. That kind of stuff causes diseases. That kind of stuff causes very bad thoughts. You got to be where you at, and be where you at, and you are where you be. That is part of the healing process. And as I said a second ago, it ain't going to taste good sometimes. It ain't going to be good sometimes. And then sometimes it's going to be good. And then sometimes it's going to fluctuate. Sometimes you deal with your grief better on Monday. And then on Tuesday, you didn't deal with it as best as you wanted to be. But Wednesday's another day. So wherever you be, that's all part of the road to recovery, ladies and gentlemen. Like I like to tell my audience, every day the sun don't shine. Sometimes it be stunning and light, and sometimes it be raining, sometimes it be snowing, sometimes it be cloudy, sometimes it be very hot. What's your point, Mr. Kajuri? It's still the weather. The bottom line is it's still the weather. Such as you're dealing with your grief and loss. You're going to fluctuate sometimes. You're going to feel good. It might be a couple of hours, and it changes again. Wherever you are, be there. But when healing is an inside job, ladies and gentlemen, it's good to listen to others, it's fine. Hear videos and go hear speakers, all that's great too. But don't let nobody supplant your own dynamic. You got your own experiences. That's one of the reasons why you guys have heard me say over the years, we all got our DNA. Nobody has your DNA. Don't try to take on nobody else's stuff. Nobody had that experience or experiences you're dealing with but you. So be where you at with that, and you'll get there when it's time. Your road to recovery is your road to recovery. My road to recovery is my road to recovery. Their road to recovery is their road to recovery. You continue to walk down your highway. Walk down your highway and you'll get there, but don't let nobody rush you. Don't let nobody make you feel ashamed or guilty about your grief and loss. Like I said, it comes in many ways. But I want to share with y'all tonight, start with yourself first. Are you holding on to any grief and loss as it relates to yourself that you haven't dealt with yet? Because one thing about it, ladies and gentlemen, I learned all these years of mental health, if you don't deal with it, it's going to deal with you. So deal with it. Deal with it. Be where you at with it, and you'll get there when it's time. I had an old man tell me everything happens in time, on time, and with time. Yet nothing will happen before it's time. Yet when it's time for something to happen, nothing can stop it. So whatever season you're in, as it relates to your grief and loss, be there with it. And you'll get there when you're supposed to get there. Use your own time clock. Don't let nobody guilt you or shame you in the way you should be. Please, ma'am, and please, sir, stay up, stay strong. Take it inch by inch, day by day, minute by minute. You'll get there when it's time. Don't you allow, I like to say, nobody to make you feel ashamed and guilty about where you are as far as dealing with your grief and loss. Because why? They didn't have the experiences you did. Make it work for you in your own season. Your own season. And you'll get there and you'll know when you've healed. It's an inside job. It's not an outside job. Thank you very kindly.